Welcome to VolleyTalk alongside Amir Snassen. I'm Elliot Skelly. Joining us today, the former head coach of the Hilliard Darby Panthers, two-time state champion, and current director of the Vanguard Volleyball Club, Brian Webb. Coach, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me here.
No problem. So you grew up in Hilliard. You've been around boys volleyball for a long time. You took over as the head coach at Darby in 2010. Can you give us kind of a history of Darby volleyball before you got there?
Yeah, so I graduated from high school in 2000. So I played there. 2000 was the second class after the Hilliards had split. So at that point in time, there were only two schools. Played there, graduated from there, went to school. Never thought I would be involved with volleyball ever again. And the head coach there at the time asked me to come back and be an assistant. So I started coaching the JV team there in 2003 and coached all the way up through 2010 before I took over as head coach. So actually a long story, but I had been there the entire time since the inception of the start of the program, really.
Now, from an outside perspective, there definitely seems to be a strong culture at Derby. For those who may be unaware about it, what is that culture like and how did you work to implement it?
Well, I think first and foremost, I had some really good coaches ahead of me that helped me build that culture a little bit more than it, I don't know if maybe more than it was. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but put my own spin on it, I guess. So I had some really great leaders ahead of me that kind of led me into the direction I wanted to go with my personality. Um, I think the one thing we've always wanted to do is not treat volleyball like volleyball. And what I mean by that is, a lot of us are multiple sport athletes. We played basketball, we played football, and we wanted that intensity brought into the volleyball gym.
Sure.
So we've always tried to train really, really hard and leave it all on the table, kind of in the training room, and make sure the guys are prepped up and give them the best chance of success.
Now, you went to four state championships in your career, but maybe more significantly brought Derby their first championship appearance before getting the first championship in 2013. What was that battle like to come so close and then get it done?
Well, a lot of heartbreak. So, keep in mind I played there and I coached there since 2003. And although I wasn't the head coach, I was just as sad as all the players and the coaches when we weren't winning them. And, I think in maybe the late 2008, 2009 area, I was like, man, maybe this is never going to happen. We've been here so many times. We can't get over the hump and it's discouraging. So, to finally get over that hump in 2013 was a really good feeling.
Well, you started Vanguard pretty shortly after that. Can you describe kind of what went into that process and how that the starting of the club came about?
Yeah, and actually that's a little correction there. The club was actually started by two folks before me.
Okay. All right.
So I took the club over, Wes and I took the club over in 2013. Um, the club started in 2007, and really at that point in time, it was started because we kept getting beat by the Cincinnati teams,
Yeah.
and they were all playing club, and we knew if we ever wanted to compete, we needed to get our guys playing all the way around. And I never thought that it would lead to what it's led to. It's kind of just morphed into something a lot different, and so it's been really cool. But yeah, we took the club over in 2013.
And then after a year hiatus, you won the second state championship for Derby in 3 years. What was that run like, and how did it differ from the win in 2013?
Well, in my opinion, we had the best team in the state in 2013. So I felt like we were the favorites on a talent perspective. And the 2015 team that won, and I'll probably get some flack for this, but we were probably, a top 10 team that just made it happen when it needed to. And so, we played the number one team in the state in the Elite Eight that year, which was St. X. And I was pretty certain we were going home in three. And we ended up kind of shocking them in the first set. And then, we ended up going five and we had nothing to lose, really. No one expected us to win. Most of the team that year were sophomores. So they were young. They didn't know what was on the line. And we ended up kind of winning that game. And I think we just had some confidence for the next two and we're able to kind of pull that off. So much, much different teams for sure.
Now, at that point, with you running Vanguard, did that impact how your players developed a lot, you thought?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. And for the most part, I think they were all pros.
sure.
I will say that class of 2013, I was basically coaching all year round for 3 years, and I know for certain they were fairly sick of me by the time it was all over. But I think at the end of the day, looking back, it all kind of worked out.
Definitely. Now, for those who care about, the public versus private dynamic, the state championship in 2015 is still the most recent by a public school. Did you ever kind of buy into that dynamic? I know you mentioned getting a club to beat the Cincinnati schools, but did you ever buy into that?
There's a difference for sure. I think how we have to recruit at the public schools, at least when I was in Hilliard, is much different. Like we really, really have to try, go out there and get those kids to play. I mean, even in our best years, I would field three teams with 24 or 25 on the roster. So, we're talking eight varsity, eight JV, eight freshmen. And we were in the buildings, we were in the schools recruiting the kids. One of our assistants was at the middle school forever, so he was really helping us pull some of the talent down there in the middle school.
Sure.
But we really, really had to work to get players. So that alone, I think, is a big differentiator. And then, I mean, obviously, the coaches down there in Cincinnati, they're great. Um, and so you combine some of that coaching with the talent they have, and it's really hard to overcome.
Yeah. And I think we've seen, as interest goes up, I think it's a little easier to field more than 24. So hopefully that's helped even the playing field a little bit. By the time you left the program, you guys had won 18 straight OCC conference titles, one of the most dominant stat lines, I think, in Ohio boys volleyball history. You host the OCC Challenge every year. What is that event, maybe for someone who doesn't know, and how did that come about?
Yeah, again, this was the coaching staff before me created
Okay,
this. And the intent, the original idea behind that was kind of like the Big Ten ACC Challenge. So we
sure.
were we were stealing it from NCAA basketball, and that's kind of how it all started. So I love the event. I rarely see high school matches anymore, and that's one I try to make it to, every year. I just think it's a really, really special environment.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting connection too. We haven't heard a lot of coaches talk about, boys volleyball in Ohio and connect it to not just any other sport, but also to the college level. But after all the success you had, what contributed to your decision to eventually retire as Darby's head coach in 2017 and focus on Vanguard?
Yeah, it was pretty easy. My second child was born, so I have a son and a daughter who are now 10 and 7. And so when my daughter was born, I knew my time was up. I'm not a teacher in the building, so my work schedule had me practicing, 5:30 to 7:30 and later at night. And then of course game nights I'm not getting back till, 9:30 or 10 with the bus trips and things of that nature. So I knew that it was coming. It wasn't I don't think it was a shock to anyone around me either. And, having someone like Coach Bell who played for me and his brothers all played for me and he's a teacher in the building there. It was an easy move because I was like, hey, the culture is going to stand and we can keep a lot of our traditions. We have so many traditions kind of behind the scenes that have been going on 25 years now. And so that made things a lot easier for me.
Yeah. Well, back to Vanguard. You're kind of known for like recruiting players from really wide areas, certainly from all of Ohio, but also, you get to Pennsylvania and some of the other Midwest states. How does that make your club stronger? And then what challenges does that present to kind of accommodate everyone's schedules?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one thing that Wes and I have really focused on is the recruiting piece since we took over. And it was one of those things very similar to the high school season where, if our kids didn't play club, we knew we had no chance of winning a state title.
Sure.
And on the national scene, we were both very interested in trying to win an open national championship. And we knew that the talent alone in the state of Ohio wasn't typically going to be enough to drive teams to win an open championship. So about 2015 or 16, we just started asking kids out of the region. We asked a few kids from Akron. I think Austin Gerwig was one of our first guys out of the region that we really said, hey, the worst he can tell us is no. And so he kind of came down. So he was with us for a few years. And it really all just stemmed from that. We just started asking guys from out of the region. And then we really modified our schedule. So our gold teams only practice on the weekends now.
Sure.
So the guys will drive in on Friday. We do a 3-hour practice, and then we do a 3-hour practice on Saturday. And, they're pretty grueling practices. So the guys are fairly exhausted by the time they leave. And it's worked great. I think a couple key things that have been beneficial to that is the parents really like driving the kids. We've heard from multiple parents that they would have never spent time with their sons driving otherwise.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to do their thing on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. So they're able to spend some time. And then from a team standpoint, they're staying the night with each other. So they're almost forced to be a little bit tighter than just kind of meeting at a practice and then, rolling home.
For sure. Now, in 2023, you had the best run ever by an Ohio boys club program, making it to the Final Four at the AAU Nationals in the 18 Open before taking a competitive loss to the eventual national champions. What was that experience on the biggest club stage like?
That's interesting. I think, in the moment, I wasn't thinking a whole lot about it. The way the tournament is set up, it's just next, 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 next. Day 3 of that tournament, we had played in the morning, and we didn't have our I guess go-to match to get into gold until like 8 p.m. at night. And that was the only one that just, it was a lot of time to think. Then the guys were off their feet for a while, and then we had to come back on. So we played that game. I don't think it ended until about 10 p.m. And then we ended up playing sports performance in the Elite Eight at 8 a.m. So the turnaround there was difficult. And I think in the moment you're just trying to do your best to keep winning games, and then after it's all said and done, then you have a little bit more time to reflect. But that team, that team was our first tournament of the year. We were in Chicago, and I think, there were maybe 64 teams in that tournament. We finished 52nd, something like that. I mean, we had an awful tournament. And so that team really, their trajectory from that time, that first tournament of the year to the end was really incredible. I think we ended up winning 3 or 4 tournaments in the winter. And then we went out to SoCal Cup and lost in the final there to the same team we lost to at AAU's. And yeah, it was a really good run. Good team, good group of guys.
Yeah. Special group of guys for sure. Now, your success at Darby, like we said, unmatched at the public school level and good for any school in general. If you had to give one piece of advice for coaches that were kind of trying to emulate what you had there, what would that be?
It's tough to narrow it down to one.
You can give me a bunch if you want to.
Yeah. I would say my assistants were certainly an unsung heroes.
Sure.
So there was a guy by the name of Joe Ross, who was the teacher at the middle school and also was an assistant of mine, that helped me get a lot of the talented athletes out of the middle school.
Mm.
So without him kind of getting those guys, knowing the good kids, knowing the guys we wanted in our program, I don't know how much of this happens. And then my best friend now and co-owner of Vanguard is Wes Almond. And I think I was and still am kind of bad cop and he's good cop. And I think our dynamic and what we were looking to accomplish was the same. And we just kind of went at it a different way. And It was a match made in heaven there. So having your whole staff and everything on the same page is huge. And then obviously that talent, you have to have the talent piece. You have to get athletes. When we know that we're playing the Elders and the X's and the Mullers of the world, and they're starting in elementary school, we can't beat them with experience. The only way we were going to beat them was to out athlete them. And so we needed those guys. And then I think making sure you're prepared, putting pressure on your guys in practice to make sure they're ready when the time comes, and they're not shocked by the lights. So I was always really proud of our guys at state tournament time that, I think we always executed to kind of our skill set.
It's awesome. Well, I mean, obviously, I don't think you're leaving Vanguard anytime soon, but kind of as your kids get older, is there any chance you go back to the high school coaching stage?
I don't see myself going back to the high school. It's
Okay.
just too big of a commitment. If my kids decide to play, I may coach them.
Yeah.
I've been trying to avoid that thus far. But if it's something they get into and they're serious about, then I would jump in there. But high school it's just every day, and I've been into a couple high school gyms since I left, and I can't believe that I was there every day all the time. It's hard to put myself back into that, and so yeah, I don't see that happening.
Makes sense. Well, like, Coach, we appreciate you. Good to get a glimpse back into some history of Darby volleyball. You're doing great work at Vanguard, so yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, likewise. Awesome to see you guys here, and I was able to educate myself before the show. So really cool what you got going on. I think it's a
Thanks.
great idea.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great night, guys.
You too. All right, that was Brian Webb. Always cool to get a look into the past with volleyball. I want to kind of do that more next coming episode. So that was really cool. So some big matches in Division One. At Elder over LaSalle in four. Is it part of the GCL Fridays? I know we had St. X over Moeller in three. So pretty dominating win from St. X, set to 25-14. I was a little surprised, if I'm being honest. I think it kind of solidified that Muller's just not quite there this year. As far as the Elder win, I've heard from, like Bill was telling me one time, Bill Ferris, about like, LaSalle's gym, the ceiling height, it just ends up getting you a lot of the time. So I'm not too concerned about that. We'll see if it becomes a pattern. What were your thoughts on those GCL matches?
Yeah, I mean, the ceiling is the way it is. I thought Elder did a decent job to try to direct their passes to make sure, it wasn't getting redirected by that ceiling. I think it goes back to what you were saying about Moeller. We've seen this a lot over the past 3 seasons now when St. X has hosted the Crusaders. They've had a really good advantage, and we see it here this time, 25-17, 25-14, 25-18. The Bombers had that set for a good chunk of time. Each time they were able to really assert their dominance. And that's something we've seen out of the Bombers. And again, the Crusaders have not really been doing a really good job against St. X. You think about it from this perspective, too. They lost all the games they played against the Bombers last year. 2023, if it wasn't for that 5-set win in the regional final, they would have been swept by the Bombers that year, too. I mean, in the regular season, they got swept. It's been an interesting rivalry to say the least over the past 3 years, and again, we're seeing St. X dominate.
Oh, hey,
I guess.
24-18 Bombers set match point. Joe Taggart back to serve. I have a feeling he's going to rip this ball.
And he does rip it. What a serve from Joe Taggart. What a way to end the game.
We had Thomas Worthington over St. Ignatius in 3 sets. That was a great match. So in our rankings, Thomas Worthington now #1 team in the state. What did you think about that match?
I mean, I think it shows that T-Dub is here to play. And we talked about that at the beginning of the year, that they were going to be one of the contenders, and they definitely showed it overall. And I think, you take a look at the makeup of that team, you take a look at Ignatius. It's always interesting when you take a look at a team like Thomas Worthington, who has a lot of now veterans on their team, and Ignatius also has a decent amount of veterans. But again, you look at a guy like Andrew Broby, Jack Reagan, they have guys that, can really flourish. They're going to be back next season. So that also matters a little bit. So I think it's an interesting battle, and I don't think this will be the only time we see these two teams play this season.
It would play in the state championship or at the Elite Eight finals. So those are the two big stages. I think, for Thomas, one of the big things is everyone is a threat. Like you have to honor everyone. And then I would think from where I'm sitting, I think they have the best middle presence in the state. Obviously, we talk about Finn Rubin going to Loyola 6'8". Also Dylan Johnson, only a short 6'3", but he's pretty dang effective. So, I think they got a lot of talent. I'm interested to see how they play this weekend. I had Elder over Jerome in 3. Now, we were kind of talking about does Jerome crack into that top 10? I think they did for you. They were just outside mine, but I was talking with Coach Tierney, and he said he thought they were a pretty great team. He compared them to Lakota East. He said maybe in a match, Jerome would kind of take the edge in 5 sets over Lakota East. So that's pretty good praise, I think, considering we weren't really considering them for the top 10. The only reason that I kind of had pause was because of their match against Thomas Worthington earlier tonight, Thursday. That third set, 25-11, it's just like, first two were close, that third one, and maybe it's just, kind of the mental aspect of being down 2-0 to a team like Thomas this year, kind of getting to them. But I would have liked to see that be a little closer. But again, I think they're right outside. I would expect them at some point, if they keep playing the way they are, to break into my top 10.
Yeah, and the reason why I have them in my top 10 is just the fact that they've been competitive. I think a lot of us, including ourselves, overlooked the fact that they did beat Berlin
Yep.
earlier in, last week. And, that was a late Thursday night game. It was, not really on our radar. And, like we said, not too many people thought of it, but the fact of the matter is they've been getting results and they've been playing relatively competitive. And, you look at that score line, 25-20, 25-19, 25-18. Very similar to when Elder played Lakota East, and that was actually a home game for the Thunderhawks. So Jerome actually had a little bit of an uphill battle going to a place like Elder, and they kept it relatively competitive. And again, and we've talked about this many times before over the past few years. If you can be competitive in these types of situations against, dare I say, state contenders like Elder, you're gonna get into the top 10.
Yeah, so we were talking about Darby at the beginning of the year. Maybe it's Jerome that's going to challenge Thomas in the regional final. So we could see them come in. They're the two top teams in the OCC Cardinal. Thomas not taking the lead there. Over in Division Two, heck of a lot of things happened. It was kind of like 2 through 8 all beat each other. It's crazy. Mount Vernon over St. Charles in 5, so a big win for them there. Try with St. Vincent St. Mary, St. Charles, and Firestone. So St. Charles over Firestone in 3, Firestone over St. Vincent St. Mary in 5, and then St. Vincent St. Mary over St. Charles in 3. So it's like I don't even know what the heck to think from that. Quad with Fenwick, Alter, DeSales, and Waterston, where each team only played 2 matches. We had Fenwick over Waterston in 3, Alter over DeSales in 3, Fenwick over DeSales in 3, and then Waterston over Alter in 5. So kind of, DeSales maybe a step below, but some big results there with Fenwick and Waterston. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you make of this mess of matches we got from D2 this week?
I mean, yeah, it is a mess. And, when I was putting my rankings together, I was thinking to myself, we talk about head to head, strength of schedule. At this point, we might as well just look at wins. Just
Right.
whoever has the most amount of wins. And you look at the top 10. That's just where we are right now in Division Two. And that's something we haven't really said, in the past 2 seasons. But you take a look at this try with St. Vincent St. Mary. Again, a team that we talked about before as being that, that leader in Region 6. And then you have a team like Firestone making the drop from Division 1 to Division 2. That's a big statement to win for them because we haven't found that team that can really back up St. Vincent St. Mary's. We thought it might be Hopen, but Hopen's really starting off rough. I don't think they've picked up a win this season. And
Yeah.
then we talk about Brecksville Broadview. They're also struggling too. So it's hard to find that replacement for essentially that second team, but I think Firestone might have it overall, and I think St. Vincent St. Mary is a good way to rebound too with getting that win over St. Charles. Again, it just shows a bunch of parity. The
Hmm.
fact of the matter is you have Waterston, you have St. Charles, you have Mount Vernon, DeSales. I mean, a bunch of teams that could potentially be in Region 5. And we're looking at Region 5 the way we were looking at Region 8 back in 2023 when you have a 6 seed Baden against a 5th seed McNick in the final. Again, a final that nobody expected. And yet here we are. And I feel like Especially in Central Ohio, that's where we're going towards right now.
Yeah, D2 is a different beast, man. I love it. Like D1, it feels like the rankings don't change a whole lot every week. Maybe every now and then there's an upset, but D2, it's like I think I text you. It's like the only thing I know this week is McNick at one, and that's about it. So, yeah, it's awesome. We had Fenwick over LaSalle in three. So LaSalle right now, I think 3-7. They really don't have a D2 resume, so I think they can come be competitive, but they don't have any big wins and really haven't played very well in D1 thus far. So we'll see if they can turn it around. St. Vincent St. Mary turned around and beat Firestone in 4 sets. So kind of a revenge game there. Firestone also playing competitive against St. Ignatius. So I don't know. I think Firestone, like you said, is a team to watch in D2. Yeah, big matches in D2. We got our Centerville Elite Eight picks here. I'm going to let you go first. What do you got, Centerville Elite Eight?
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the first round. I expect it to be all chalk. That's something we've seen, especially in this top four. They seem to stand alone. I think the only, of course, non-sweep there is Elder over Berlin in four, and I think the Bears might get some luck on their side. They might be able to take a set win again. A little bit more time off, especially with Elder coming off of that result against Moeller the night before. Round two is when things get a little bit interesting, but then again, we've seen this the past few years. Sometimes we see semifinals go the distance, sometimes we don't. And I don't really see it this much. Ignatius just looks better than Elder. I think it just looking at the makeup, I think Jack Reagan should have a big game. I think especially knowing the other pieces on that team with Henry Van Ginkel, Andrew Broby, they should be able to make some noise and they go to the final. On the other side, and we discussed this when we found out about the bracket. Thomas Worthington, again, interestingly enough, a third seed. And I think arguably they are better than St. X this year, who is trying to piece themselves around Joe Taggart. And we've seen that do really well, and sometimes it's not. And I think it's going to haunt the Bombers in the end. I have the Cardinals going to the final, which would set up basically a championship match between T-Dub and Ignatius rematch. Second time these two would be playing each other in 8 days. And I think Iggy gets the revenge. This will be a neutral site game, but I think Coach Dom's side is ready for the challenge, and I think they're ready for matchups like this. Other things to note too, X over Elder in five. I think the Bombers will get some revenge. And again, those are two teams that are expected to play in GCL. You also got Darby. I think Darby might also make a little bit of noise down the stretch. I think Moeller might be the one team that would kind of suffer some pitfalls, the same way Ignatius did last year, where we expected them to do really well or maybe pull some upsets, and instead things just don't work in their favor. So I think the Crusaders end out in seventh.
Yeah, so I largely agree with that. I think, yeah, our bracket's almost exactly the same. Just a note on the seating. I talked to Troy Brewer at Centerville over there about how he took it. It's like the Max Preps rankings, but it was for some reason like really old. Like he took them Monday morning before they updated. So it was, I don't know. I don't like Max Preps rankings in general. Like it's all math, right? So towards the end of the season, it makes some sense, but I don't understand how you can have two teams that have head-to-head win that have a head-to-head matchup, and you don't put the one who won over if they have comparable records. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Um, like I could see, like we were talking earlier, like I could see if you say, "Hey, I think St. X's trajectory is a little bit better. I think by the end of the year they'll be the best team in GCL." Like, all right, fine, but Elder beat him like straight up, and like their losses, it shouldn't really factor in based on like Louisville, St. X, and Thomas Worthington are Elder's losses. It doesn't really make sense to me to put St. X over them for any reason right now, but Max Preps does, so Centerville Elite Eight does, and then I don't know. I don't really get it, but nevertheless, these are the seeds. So I agree with everything pretty much you said. I think round one's pretty much going to be all chalk. I predict 4 sweeps. We'll see if that happens. Of course, there's always someone will take a set here and there. The Ox Gym sometimes can throw it off. Like I know Liberty played Elder last year and it was like 25-10, then they switched sides and then one of the sides doesn't have any room to serve. And it was like really like 25-23 and then it was 25-10 set three when they switched again. So that could factor in. Generally the better team still comes out. Round two, I think St. Ignatius over Elder in 5 sets. I see that being a battle. I really like this Elder team this year. I think St. Ignatius is just a little bit better with the power of Jack Reagan, but Elder's really well rounded. I think they can give him a great battle, if not knock him off. But I think that'll be a close win for Ignatius in five. I think I agree with you what you said about Tom Swordsman being just a little bit better than St. Xavier. And then I've got Tom Swordsman over St. Ignatius in four in the finals. I think I think they are the best team in the state, most talented team in the state right now. The one thing I could see, the reason that they wouldn't win it, we talked about the very beginning of the year at that try match with Louisville, St. X, and Elder. JT McGuire's got like this back thing, it's just overuse. So I don't know. There's a chance that I think Finn's had some, random injuries going on too. So there's a chance that by the time they get to that third match, that guys are just too beat up and they can't play certain people. That first match against Moeller, even though I expect them to win, that kind of complicates a little more. It's tougher to rest your starters against Moeller than it is maybe an 8 seed. So that could factor in a little bit. But if everyone is able to stay healthy, I see Thomas Worthington taking the win in this. Taking a look at our Division One rankings. So pretty much chalk for the first seven. Obviously had that Thomas Worthington Ignatius matchup. I think that 1 through 5 makes perfect sense. Berlin, I still think that their loss in 5 to Jerome, like we were talking about with how Jerome's been playing, doesn't look nearly as bad. And they have the head-to-head win over Pick North. Obviously, Pick North was not very happy with us at all at the rankings, but I always would rather see competitive losses than just empty wins. And I think that's always been something that I've kind of seen for Pick North. They don't love to schedule really tough. They kind of know what matches they can win. So they went up to St. X last year. They don't really have anything like that this year. Their toughest match is Berlin, and then maybe the OCC Challenge. Maybe they'll see Thomas, but outside of that, it's all pretty winnable. So that's kind of my reasoning for putting them lower than maybe potentially higher. But I don't like being 13-1 for the sake of being 13-1. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but
No, I agree with you. And I think Pick North, again, as we've talked about with Lakota East and many other teams, they're getting the wins they're expected to win. And you look at Pick North's schedule, they're playing a lot of teams that, are either below 500 or at 500, and even some decent teams, as they were playing Lincoln earlier today, they got it done. But at the same time, there's still a little bit of, we want to see some competition, right? And you want to make sure your players are ready for competition when you're taking on a team like Berlin and many others at around Region 1 play. Because we've talked about that with Pick North before. They've been able to take their division, but once they get towards the playoffs, things start to really spiral for them. So it'll be interesting, especially in a Region 1 that is wide open now that Liberty is essentially rebuilding this year, if they can, really get over the hump and get towards the Final Four and punch their ticket to Wittenberg. But I think it's just really interesting right now. But again, they get the wins they're supposed to win and they stay in.
over in Division Two, I mean, we talked about it. It was a little tough to make sense of, but I think we did a pretty good job. McNicket one's a no-brainer. Fenwick's been playing really well. They beat Waterston, so them at 2 makes a lot of sense. Waterston coming out beating St. Vincent, St. Mary in 5, beating St. Charles, so they're making a name for themselves. I think Mount Vernon's still playing competitive with that win in 5 over St. Charles. Alter dropped a little bit for both of us. We got Firestone starting to get into the mix. The only thing I will say, like, I want some more out of Roger Bacon. They really don't have a huge resume yet. I think they can get in there. I don't know. I got to see them get some wins here against good teams. But outside of that, yeah. Any thoughts on D2?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot going on, and this is where really strength of schedule versus head to head really starts to poke out. You take a look at Roger Bacon's schedule, they've got Lakota West tomorrow, or when this airs will be later that night, Friday night. But then that Saturday they take on St. Charles and then also Brecksville Broadview. So they finally get some more Division Two action, at least some action that we can look at and really measure where they're at right now. If they can play competitive against St. Charles, that can really tell a lot, and especially knowing where both of them, where I have Roger Bacon and St. Charles, where you have them, I think that will be a big factor in where both of those teams are as we do this next week. I think again, Loveland's one of those teams making the drop from Division 1 to Division 2, getting a big win against Baden as well. I think Baden just overall, again, not just in the idea of being in the Division 2 scene overall a little bit longer, but the fact that they're able to really have some sort of advantage at home. I'm looking back at that win against Carroll, right? Really dealt them well. Carroll coming off a quad from the past weekend. I was ready to put Carroll in the top 10, and then along came Baden, and all of a sudden Baden just looked really, really good. So you never know what happens in Hamilton. I think the Rams could make some noise. And again, Firestone this past weekend got that signature win against STVM. And while, again, they're playing relatively competitive, maybe not getting the results they want in Division Two against teams that are higher than them, they got that signature win and they're starting to make some noise too.
I will say I played at Baden once. I did not have a great experience. Their ceiling's real low too. It's like I don't know. Oh well. They also beat us, so that didn't help. But all right, that'll do it for this week. May I hear any final thoughts?
I mean, there's a lot of competition going on, Centerville Elite Eight, and also not at the Centerville Elite Eight. So many games going on that can determine this entire season. A lot more parity, a little bit more clarification, or maybe not, depending on what we see at the Centerville Elite Eight in terms of Division One, Division Two continues to stay crazy. But this is the type of competition we love, right? I mean, when you have so many different teams that are being competitive, playing against each other, there's so much different results, so much parity. There's so much to enjoy too, because that's what's going to lead to a really good playoffs and a really good postseason and season overall down the stretch.
Big gut check, couple days or one day when this airs, Centerville Elite Eight tournament. That'll be sweet. Driving up for that yet again, so that'll be cool. And then Division Two, just the madness keeps going. April Madness, they call it, right? All right, with that, this has been Ohio Volley Talk, and we will catch you next week.